also the love between two people, the love we have for our beloved. And the same principles apply, that even though our beloved may appear to trod the same path, it is somewhat different for them because it's their individual path. And the same thing, let's not judge our beloved, even if we think they're doing something really wrong. Let's seek to understand them, and let's seek to find acceptance, and let's seek to love them where they are. And if they need healing, our beloved, maybe we can ask them, it looks like you need maybe a little healing in this area, or like you're struggling in this area. Can I help? Can I help you? And it's this reaching out to our beloved without judgment and offering help, offering healing. And this is where so many relationships, whether they be, our primary love, romantic love relationship, or a relationship between family members or friends, goes wrong, is that we get caught up in judgment. So let's use an example of, so let's say our beloved is having a bad day, and they say something unkind to us. We, instead of recognizing that their bad day probably stems from circumstances, or maybe they got triggered by an old wounding, whatever, but they just kind of exploded on us. It wasn't necessarily about us, but then we kind of pick up the torch. It's like, oh, you want to explode on me? You want to go there? Oh, I'll show you explode. You think you exploded? Let me show you. Let me define explosion for you. We all, we've been guilty of that ourselves. And then our beloved has the choice. They can either be laid flat or pick up the torch themselves and go, oh, you think that was explosion? Oh, well, I got some dynamite over here for you. And boom, boom, boom. And oh, yeah. And we've all been there. What started out as something really little escalates into something very extreme. And if we can catch ourselves, it's really hard to catch ourselves once it's escalated, almost impossible. But if we can catch ourselves at the first volley, the first lob, that first, harsh word, and say, oh, wow, I think oh, wow, maybe you're hurting, or maybe you're upset, or oh. And if we can respond in love and in kindness and offer healing, or maybe our beloved can't accept healing, so, because sometimes this happens, then we have to walk away. But we walk away in forgiveness and in love. And we walk away and say, okay, clearly we can't do this right now, so I'm gonna go over here. Want you to know, still love you, still here for you, but just not right here and now here for you. Here for you in the figurative sense, not the literal sense. I'm gonna go over here and be figuratively here for you over there. And so when we do this, we sidestep a whole bunch of lobbying back and forth, of explosion and escalation, that boom, boom, back and forth. And each time it goes back and forth, it gets higher and higher, more intense and more intense, until sometimes it intensifies into violence. And that can be verbal violence, a violence of anger and intensity and verbal violence. It can be physical violence. And the way to not do that, we all got that, is to be the one who, when the first salvo is unleashed, be the one to sidestep it, and instead of taking the hit head on and responding in like kind, saying, oh, wow, ouch, yeah, something's going on here for you. Well, I'm not going to play this game. I'm not going to fire one back. I'm going to step into understanding. And oftentimes that diffuses it. And the other person goes, oh, wait, you're understanding? You're holding me in understanding? Well, let me tell you about my bad day. It was really awful and blah, 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 blah. And we can sit and hold that in understanding and really hold it while they blah, 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 blah. And then they look at us and they go, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Thank
Yes.
you. Oh my gosh, thank you. And then we're with the same person, our beloved, but it's escalating in goodness and love, and it's escalating into fabulous love instead of, and going back and forth instead of escalating into anger. Now, the same is true. So that's kind of the microcosm of individuals. The same is true for us in on our path in kind of a macro sense of if we are at the head of forging a new path, we see ourselves as representative of a certain belief system or type of person or way of being or whatever. And we encounter somebody in what we would consider the other camp, and they are firing off a salvo. Sometimes they don't know they're firing off a salvo, or sometimes they do, but whatever. But we can choose how we respond to that. We can say, oh yeah, that's your salvo? Ho ho, I'm a path forger. Your salvos are nowhere near the level of salvo I've got, so let me just show you mine. Or we can say, oh, you're surfing ping pong balls. Um, let me catch that and kind of have a conversation with you. Let me listen to you. Tell me why you're lobbing that salvo. Tell me, I want to understand where you're coming from. I want to understand why you feel this way. And when we step into understanding, and by the way, it works from both sides, because that salvo could be the person at the front of the parade, and maybe the person at home decides to get up off the couch and go to the parade. I think of myself. I look very like the person at home on the couch. I'm an older woman, and I can show up at the parade, and I have done this not at a parade, but in a smaller setting, where I have said, "Will you explain this to me? Because I don't understand, and I would like to understand." And fortunately, I chose a very gracious person at the front of the parade who said, yeah. And they sat down and they explained it to me. And it was great. And this is what we as human beings do for each other when we're operating in love and we're on different camps. And maybe somebody in one camp lobbed a salvo, and maybe they didn't mean it to be a salvo. Maybe it was just their response to, there's a parade marching by and I don't understand it. I'm going to close my windows, And so if we're always seeking this understanding, even if the person appears to be a little threatening, we can step into our strength, because there's a lot of strength in love. We can step into our strength in love and say, hey, I do not understand what's going on here, or I don't understand you, but I'd like to. I'd really like to. I'd really like to understand you. Because understanding someone does not mean we agree with them. It does not mean that we are going to leave our path and join theirs. Understanding them doesn't mean that. It just gives us a greater ability with that right hand over our heart to experience more love. So from that standpoint, we would be well served as a loving person to really seek to understand other paths, really understand them, fully understand where they're coming from, because it helps us live in harmony with them, because we are all on the same planet and we are well served to live in harmony. And while it's under the umbrella of love and we're seeking not to be judgmental, we will sometimes need understanding. Fear gets in the way of understanding. There's sometimes a fear of, if I hear too much about your path, I might be infected by your path. I might I might join your path, or people around me might join your path. It's not about that. Our path is our path. And our path might meander. We might go walk their path for a little bit with them just to encourage them. Or we might walk their path with them to understand them. And then we might go back to our own path a little bit changed, or with a broader understanding, or not changed at all, but we go, oh yeah, I know there's a new path being opened up over there in the wilderness, and I know what that path is because I've talked to those people. And I'm over here, I'm still doing my path because that's where I'm called to be. But I'm not threatened by those people. I'm the same thing. I'm over here and I'm hacking a new path and I'm expending a lot of energy. But I'm not threatened by those people over there on the old path because I've talked to them. I've really talked to them. I've understood them. I have understood them and I see value. And so that's it. That's all we do. So if something looks scary to us, or if someone's being really aggressive or angry, if we seek to understand, understanding can diffuse more problems. It can diffuse hatred, and it can diffuse this lack of harmony. It can diffuse all of this. And then we can all dwell in love and have this wonderful umbrella of love, and everybody's walking their own paths, whatever that be. Different religion, different politics, different lifestyles, different ways of being, completely opposing viewpoints. I'll tell one final story. I did have a friend one time. We were different political parties. It was a particularly hotly contested election. And this friend could not let it go and kept, every time I saw her, we went to the same gym. Every morning, she was just pounding it. Finally, one morning, I would listen. And finally, one morning, I said, I really, really have listened. And I really, really still think what I think. And if you would like the friendship to continue, you're going to need to let go of trying to convince me and trying to change me. And it worked. And I didn't have to get angry or frustrated. I listened. I didn't feel any need to convince my friend because I'm real clear about where I am. And when she was able to realize, oh, I had really heard her and I still thought what I thought, and she recognized that she was about to lose a friendship, she was able to take a step back and value the friendship and realize that it was okay for me to walk my path and her to walk hers, and we could still be really wonderful friends. And so this is what we do, because we can be, and we can and should be, wonderful friends, deeply connected with people on completely opposing, seemingly opposing. The paths aren't opposing, they just seem that way. Seemingly opposing paths. And that's really, really when we are fully walking our path and fully in love, is when we have connections and friendships with people on other paths. And we are fully, without being hampered by past woundings or our sense of judgment or any hatred or lack of harmony with people on other paths. We're just all walking our own paths, each of us, but all together and linked by love. Boom. I can't imagine what would happen in the world if we all did that. It would be amazing. Respecting each other's paths and walking our own and feeling love, one hand on our heart, feeling love for everybody.